So the Savage Locust, they were former members of the Locust Horde who survived the flooding of the Hollow, and they reverted into a feral state without the guidance of their queen. When the Jacinto city was sunk underground by the coalition of ordered governments at the end of Gears of War 2, the entire inner hollow was flooded, killing a majority of the Locust Horde by drowning before they could evacuate the hollow. So those on the surface, they survived and splintered into two factions. The Locust without Queen Mira's guidance reverted to a tribal and nomadic way of life, while the Locust guarding Queen Mira maintained guidance and direction, becoming the Queen's Guard. So despite being less organised and without a hive mentality, the Savage Locust were just as dangerous as the Locust Horde or Queen's Guard, as they maintained hostility towards all humans. So I'm your host Abz, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down the Savage Locust in full detail. So just before we start this video, if you can do me a favour and drop a like on the video if you want to see more Locust lore content. And yeah, with that out of the way, sit back, relax, and let's talk everything Savage Locust.
See, that's what happens when you flood their tunnels. They rebuild anywhere they can.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird to see them up here strolling around. They ain't the kind for a day at the beach.
Seems like they dug themselves a new home. They must be excavating the whole area. Hey, that barge looks like it's setting down. Anyone up for a hijack?
Yeah. First class to Anvil Gate? Let's do it.
So the leaderless Locust, known as the Savage Locust, they started becoming feral and they turned savage, unlike their comrades in the Queen's Guard who remained loyal to Mira. So around 16 AE, so 16 years after Emergence Day, the Savage Locust built new tunnels close to the surface, and they started living in the Deadlands on Sera and in the former homes of the Serans, trying to recapture some sense of their former homes. A large group of Savage Locust took over areas and turned them into strongholds, killing anyone who approached their territory, whether it was human or lambent. The Savage Locust would also make their way to any wreckages to scavenge supplies and kill any human survivors. Now, one of the Savage Locust's most recognisable traits is their apparent rejection of the Queen's symbol, as they appeared to no longer have any attachment to her or her army. Now, it remains unknown if the Savage Locust still believed in the Trinity of Worms religion, and if they still kept the symbols, emblems, scrolls and artifacts that seemed valuable to their kind when they still lived inside the Hollow. But with the Savage Kantuses reverting to shamanistic ways, it seems very unlikely. The Savage Locust also seemed to mark any ticker assembly lines with paintings of said creatures, though it remains unknown if they used this same technique while they were underground. Now, although the Savage Locust no longer follow the Queen's command, it remains unknown whether there was conflict or not between them and the Queen's Guard. But this was probably not the case, as both groups have been seen cooperating with each other at times, like in the Battle of the Deadlands and the Battle of Anvil Gate. The Savage Locust appeared to follow some of the original ways of the Locust, however there are many differences between the two factions. While the Locust Horde was organised and each class had a unique purpose on the battlefield, the Savage Locust appear to follow no organisation and they use any weapons they can scavenge. So as I stated in my Locust Horde lore video, in the Queen's Guard of the Locust Horde there were set military ranks, and soldiers like the Theron guards, they were highly regarded in the army. But in the Savage Locust, all of the troops seemed to be at the same baseline level, with no hierarchical structure, but more sort of like a brotherhood, as both Savage Kantus and Therons seemed to act as cannon fodder, something that only the drones and the boomers did in the Queen's army. And as stated before, it remains unknown if the Savage Kantus still reinforced the belief in the Trinity of Worms religion, although it is probable that after becoming shamans, they left their religion behind and became simple soldiers without any healing abilities. Now, the Savage Locust, they did keep some of the Locust ways, but they did abandon several of the Locust ways as well, but they still kept a deep hatred for humanity, and they would kill any human being who dared enter their territory, and they would often use their charred corpses as a warning for any intruders. But it is possible, however, that the Savage Locust eventually returned to the Queen's army, or at least they made some sort of agreement with her since they lost their main compound at the Deadlands to the Cog, and with Mira's return and her promise of a new world for the Locust, along with the fact that this time she had a weapon that could wipe out both the Lamben and the humans once and for all, could have inspired them to once again serve their queen on her quest against humanity. So this could explain why they aided the Queen's forces during the Battle of Anvil Gate and the mission to Halvor Bay on their search for Delta Squad. So now that we've explained the Savage Locust as a whole faction, let's break down all of their troops. So, first up, we have the Savage Drone. So the Savage Drones were the most common of their Savage brethren. The Savage Drones carved a new existence on the surface of Sera quite effectively. The Savage Drones were stranded after the flooding of their subterranean homeland, the Hollows. They were the most numerous members of their tribes, and they made up the bulk of the Savage Locust's fighting force. Many took residence in the infamous Seran Deadlands alongside other Savage Locust, and like all Savage Locust, the Savage Drone salvaged the MK1 Lancer Assault Rifle, which was also known as the Retro Lancer, which had the bayonet, not the chainsaw, among other weapons to do battle against foes, but they did enjoy the raw power that the Retro Lancer offered. They also had to adapt to new tactics with their underground tunnels, learning how to erupt from the ground to ambush enemies or reinforce allies. The Savage Drones have adapted their armor to their new environment, sporting a filtered breathing apparatus and a tinted mask due to the ever-present sandstorms of the Deadlands. They also wear simple cloth wraps that wind around their arms and legs to shield their skin from the sun. And due to the loss of their way of life in combination with their adoption of the MK1 Lancer, many Savage Drones have discarded standard battle tactics and will bayonet charge an enemy without warning, and they were also around 6'7" on average, just like the standard Locust Drones. We also have the Savage Boomers. Now the Savage Boomer was a boomer variant that appeared around 17 years after Emergence Day. It is armed with a digger launcher and has different armor compared to the standard Locust Boomers in the Queen's Guard. They have a larger pointed helmet that only shows their mouth area, a large collar like the Grinder, a large breastplate, and they have a belt stretching from shoulder to hip with extra digger projectiles. These boomers have reverted to a tribal mindset and have lost contact with the Queen. They were equipped with a digger launcher, but at times were also seen with the boom shot and a butcher cleaver. We also have the Savage Grenadiers, and the Savage Grenadier was a Locust drone that appeared around 18 months after the sinking of Jacinto. They are drones that reverted to primal ways. They have become tribalistic and are much more aggressive, and they use primitive weapons and charge at their enemies like barbarians. So with access to gunpowder becoming far more scarce, Savage Grenadiers opted to use incendiary grenades rather than bolo grenades due to its bountiful resource of flammable alcohol mix and ease in construction. Unlike the normal Grenadiers, the Savage Grenadiers have not limited themselves to the use of one weapon like the Nasher shotgun. They use a range of weapons, including the Hammerburst, Retro Lancer and Sword-Off shotgun. And the Savage Grenadiers do have the same muscular appearance as the standard Grenadiers, but they wear Savage Locust armor, an aviator's hat, and they wear goggles as well. And then there was the Savage Grenadier Elite, who was a Savage Locust variant of the Grenadier Elite, and the Grenadier Elite was a higher rank of the standard Grenadier that could take and deal more damage and appeared to be much more seasoned combat operatives. The Savage Grenadier Elite had gone savage after the disappearance of the Locust Queen, and the Savage Locust Grenadiers would also not limit themselves to weapons like the Grenadier Elites did. They would find any weapons they could use to deadly effect against their foes. Next up we have the Savage Kantus. Now the Savage Kantus were the feral counterpart to the Queen's loyal Kantus monks. Formed after the flooding of the Hollows, the Savage Kantus acted as the shamans to the Savage Locust until their apparent extinction upon the detonation of the Imulsion countermeasure weapon. Out of all the Locust, the Kantus priests were hit the hardest after the flooding of the Hollows. They reverted to primal shamanistic ways, and their healing screams descended into a dark tone. According to records, few sounds can replicate the terror from the screams of a Savage Kantus. As I said previously, the Savage Kantus didn't act as field commanders like the original Kantus monks did, but they acted as standard infantry, just like the other Savage Locust, due to the lack of hierarchical military structure. We also had Savage Theron Guards, who were originally just regular Theron Guards, the elite troops, that appeared after the Hollow was flooded and the Locust Horde began falling apart. They are nearly identical to the original Theron guards, except for the colour of their armour, which is nearly bleached white and garnished with red lights. They also used different weapons most of the time. For example, most Savage Therons use a butcher cleaver or sawed-off shotgun rather than their iconic weapon, the torque bow. Now, the original Theron guards, they were amongst some of the highest ranking soldiers in the Locust army, and they were head and shoulders above the drones in terms of equipment, intelligence and training. They were elite Locust troops assigned to commando-style raids against high-profile targets and high-level defensive missions that required the sort of precision the Therons possess and can handle. But the Savage Therons, just like the Kantus, seemed to act as standard infantry within the Savage Locust, but of course at the end of the day, the Savage Therons were still Therons, so they were still head and shoulders above the drones when it came to their intellect and tactics in battle. We also have the Savage Marauders. Now, it has been theorized that the Locust dubbed the Savage Marauders of the first kind of Locust drones to form any sort of organization outside of the Hollow after the events of Operation Hollow Storm. Now, this is really important, and this signifies how important Savage Marauders were to the Savage Locust, because they were essentially the founding fathers of the Savage Locust faction when you think of it. With the success of Operation Hollow Storm for the coalition of ordered governments, the Locust homeland of the Hollows was flooded, forcing any surviving Locust to take flight to the surface world. Many of these Locusts weren't able to join up with the Locust Queen aligned remnant of the Horde, turning savage. So the Savage Marauders, made of former Locust drones, were the first among their number to form any sort of organisation outside the Queen's remnant with their patchwork raiding parties. They ultimately became a sort of precursor to the Savage Locust, but it is unknown if the Marauders were eventually phased out with the more common Savage Locusts. They were brutal, bloodthirsty creatures who most often travelled in war parties in their constant search for supplies, and the Savage Marauders would wear a conch shell, and this is the same conch shell used to signal other Savage Locusts of the sighting of enemy forces. We also had the Savage Hunters. Now, the Savage Hunter is an elite troop, primarily used to track down the hiding gears and humans of Sera. Hunters are bred for one reason, and they do not relent. It doesn't matter that they are abandoned to the Deadlands, you still can't hide from them. Eventually, they will find you, and they are known for their habit of finding humans relentlessly, hence the name Hunter, and they are not to be messed with. And despite the disbandment of the Hunters in favour of Grenadiers earlier on in the Locust War, the Savage Locust, due to either desperation or lack of coherent command structure, led to the return of the Hunter Assassins. They are one of the most vicious and degenerate looking Locusts out there. Even amongst the standards of the Savage Locust, they sport large fangs and resemble more like a snake than they do a Locust. And they also wear an animal-like mask and scavenged armour as well. The Locust Ragers were actually affiliated with the Savage Locust as well, and the Rager was a specialised Locust breed that appeared during the Locust War and were known for their ability to metamorphose into monstrous forms, hence their name Rager, but they were far more dangerous when enraged. When angered, they would go into a state of metamorphosis due to emulsion build-up inside them, but due to their reckless abandon, large amounts of Ragers died off earlier in the Locust War, becoming virtually extinct. They were assumed to become virtually extinct, but a number of Ragers were actually encountered during Baird and his squad's return to Halvor Bay during the Lambent pandemic. Baird was actually surprised to see them, as they were believed to have been wiped out early in the Locust War. These Ragers were allied with the Savage Locust and became even more feral than when they were at the Horde's command. After the former members of Kilo's squad left Halvor Bay, Ragers had apparently become extinct after the emulsion countermeasure weapon was deployed, but it's unknown if any Ragers mutated to become part of the swarm. Now, those are all of the members of the Savage Locust, but they also had many war beasts at their disposal as well. So remember when I stated that the original Locust used many of the hollow creatures to their advantage for military, transportation and so on? Well, the Savage Locust, they used these war beasts as well. So first up we have the Brumak. Now the Brumak was one of the largest species of hollow creature, believed by cog scientists to be the apex predator of the hollow. Cog research indicated that they were bred from apes by the Locust, often growing to about 39 feet in height and weighing around 22,000 pounds. They were equipped with wrist-mounted chain guns and a back-mounted rocket launcher, making them deadly at both close and long range as well, and they possessed incredible strength. These giant reptilian-like creatures were enslaved by the Locust and used in battle as massive sentient tanks. But several Brumacs survived the flooding of the Hollow, and many were used once again as sentient tanks by the Savage Locust. I also do have a video already on my channel explaining the full lore and backstory behind the Brumacs, if you want to check that out as well. The Savage Locust also had wild tickers at their disposal, and tickers were creatures found in the Hollow that the Locust used as a mobile landmine by strapping emulsion tanks onto them. They were named after the ticking sound they make while scurrying across the battlefield. Many tickers also survived the flooding of the Hollows, so during the Lambent pandemic, Delta infiltrated into the Locust stronghold in the Deadlands and got attacked by several tickers and wild tickers on their voyage. They eventually discovered a ticker assembly line where Savage drones and Savage Grenadiers were applying the emulsion tanks to wild tickers that are chained to a moving rail. They killed some of the tickers in their cages, while they used the tickers in the rail to kill the Locust, supplying them with their own explosives. And there was also a cutscene where the Savage Locust watched two wild tickers fight to the death, which shows how brutal the Savage Locust really were. And there were also many wild tickers scurrying around the Deadlands in groups, eating away at wreckages and rummaging through anything useful. Now, one of the signature creatures that the Savage Locust used were the Locust gas barges. And the Locust gas barges were huge creatures that can float and propel themselves through the air, and they first appeared on the surface 18 months after the sinking of Jacinto. After the Hollow was flooded, the Locust remnant needed a new strategy to fight off the Cog and Lambent, and used the gas barges to do so. Gas barges are able to fly by use of a large floating creature, the top half of which holds gas lighter than air. It is crudely maneuvered by a navigation system connected to a pair of razor-sharp spikes thrusting into the creature's sides, causing the creature to move in whatever direction the Locust desired. So these spikes are very similar to horse spurs, only scaled up. However, the craft is quite sluggish and large, meaning that they are very easy to hit, unlike the speedier and smaller Reavers. Gas barges carry a platform underneath. These sported 4 Boomshot or Mk1 Lancer fitted multi-turrets and 2 dorsal belly turrets on the port and starboard side for attacking Cog forces. The Savage Locust also used these to deploy troops into the fight, so the gas barges were great assault airships for them. The Savage Locust also used siege beasts. Now, the siege beast was a large creature that had been enslaved by the Locust Horde and the Savage Locust as well, and turned into a catapult-like machine. They were known to be used by the Locust during their pre-industrial era and were reintroduced into their armed forces after the flooding of the Inner Hollow. To operate as a catapult, the creature is forcibly strapped into a war machine with its limb continually bent back so projectiles can be launched at enemy positions. Cole commented on how the turkey is very accurate at destroying targets, which it was, and the Savage Locust used the siege beasts to deadly effect. The siege beast is a creature enslaved by the Locust for use as an artillery piece. It has been mounted on a carriage for better mobility and to stop it from turning on its masters, but its head is still exposed and will bite anything close to it. It is armed with a giant catapult on its back made from its own limbs, and it also appears to be a totally self-sufficient weapon, so to prepare it for firing, the large appendages at the front are wound back and held into position. Then a canister on its back opens and deposits a large ball of explosive organic matter into the cup on the end of the wound limbs. The cupped limbs are then released, creating a huge amount of energy, firing the explosive ordnance accurately, even at long ranges, and it can cause devastating amounts of damage to King Raven helicopters or even a Brumac when hijacked by Cog gears. No known Theron has seen the siege beast before its enslavement to the Horde, but like all hollow creatures, they were effectively tamed and later used as war machines by the Locust Horde. And the Savage Locust also had savage corpses at their disposal as well. So corpses were huge spider-like creatures that lived in the Hollow. Like many of the Hollow's creatures, corpses were harnessed by the Locust as beasts of war. They were often used to dig tunnels so that Locust forces could emerge to the surface. Although much of the corpse population was wiped out after Operation Hollow Storm, a sizable number managed to escape and became wild. Some of them were found by the Savage Locust and kept in captivity to be bred and tamed for battle in the Deadlands. So Delta Squad later confronted a number of these corpses as they made their way through Savage Locust territory. However, Delta Squad accidentally stumbled into a corpse nest. A hatchling burst out of one of the eggs and it was killed when it attempted to attack them, but the death of its offspring enraged the mother corpser, who let out a roar which caused the eggs to hatch. So Delta fought off the Savage Corpser hatchlings and the mother corpser appeared to face its offspring's killers. But Delta Squad managed to kill the mother corpser and the Savage Corpser hatchlings as well. But the Savage Corpsers, they were another one of the many war beasts used by the Savage Locust in their war effort. But there you have it guys, there's the Savage Locust fully explained. So if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and comment down below what do you think of the Savage Locust. And let me know what you thought of the video as well, and subscribe if you haven't done so already for more Gears of War lore and video game lore content, and be sure to check out my playlist for more lore related content. Hope you guys have a great day and I will catch you next time.